Hello YouTube, we're going to be doing a caliper swap with the brake job, and to start off we have our torque wrenches, our tools, our car jacks, and our caliper, and our impacts, and we're also obviously going to need our rotors. So to start off, we're going to want to put the back rear handbrakes up to make sure the car doesn't move, and obviously use your jack to lift your car up and make sure there's support so we can take the wheel off. First things first, you're going to want to take off the banjo bolt. The banjo bolt is behind the caliper, and it's what connects the actual brake line to the caliper itself. It is where the fluid comes in. You're going to just want to loosen it a little bit so you won't have to take it off and have problems and issues when the caliper is off. It's just easy, it makes work so much more easier, and just a tad, just a little bit. And using your 12mm, you're going to loosen the banjo bolt. You're going to see a little bit of brake fluid come out, and that's okay. And just tighten it back up, but not too hard, just enough snug so you can untighten it with your hand again later. Just like so. Okay, now that you got that out of the way, we're going to put sauerkraut can or whatever can you have over a bucket, and then we're going to put a little brick on top. So we put the caliper on top of this so it's not putting any stress or pressure on the actual brake line itself. You want to make sure you have something to support the caliper because the brake line is very fragile, and the last thing you want is for it to kink or snap. So you're just going to want to put the caliper on the whatever bucket, brick, whatever you have. Some people put it up there, not the best. Put it on the brick. Makes your life easier. You don't want to harm any of the banjo bolt or the brake line itself. Okay, you're going to want to grab your 14mm, and then now you're going to want to take both bolts off the main caliper. Now with your bolts taken off and put to the side, put your metal bucket or whatever you have right beside your wheel hub, and slowly take out the caliper and make sure that brake line is not kinked, and make sure that you put it snug so you can have enough room and enough access to take out the other hub bearing pad bolts. That is one of the most important crucial steps. Now you're going to take your 17mm and take the top and bottom hub to caliper bolts holding the caliper itself, or the brake pads themselves. And obviously this is much harder than it seems, especially when you're holding one phone, and as you can see here, I put a stone on top of the bucket to rest the caliper on, so it's not putting enough stress, too much stress on the actual brake line. Okay, after you untightened everything, you can freely with your hand untighten the screws and put them to the side. Now again, this is more difficult for me because I'm using one hand and using my other knee to support the brake pad holder of the caliper, so my apologies. Now for the rotor itself, you can either take it off or use the same one. If you can't take it off, then you're gonna have to unscrew the two screws and make sure you clean the spokes. And if you can't take it off, then grab a hammer, and in a star pattern on the actual hub itself, you're gonna wanna hit it in a star pattern, like up, down, left, right. It's better if you do it on the hub itself, but the rotor will also works too, and you should freely be able to take the rotor off. And once you cleaned with a wire brush around the spokes and the hub, and you can put some anti-seize around the places you cleaned so there's no rust, and it'll be easier to take off the rotor next time you're doing the brake change. I guarantee you won't need a hammer or hammer anything off. It just slide off like butter. This is common practice. especially around the spokes of the hub bearing of the wheel. After you get the brand new brake rotor on, make sure you don't touch the actual surface of it. Just try touching the hub because, you know, you don't want to contaminate it. And again, you want to get your anti-seize and just put them around the spokes. Make sure this does not touch the actual part of where the brake pads will touch because you don't want that cross-contamination. This is for, usually I like to do it because Kia and Hyundais, they have this issue that sometimes the tire does not want to come off and you have to bang it a million times with the hammer just for the tire to fall off. So this will help you prevent those issues. The tire won't come off, and like I said, this will let next time you take off your tires, it'll slide off like butter. That's what you want. It's just a little trick I learned over the years. Now for the caliper, this is the most important part. Make sure the caliper says right side. Many times mechanics and other people like to switch them sides, put left on right and right on left. You will see it says B2-R. The other one says B2-L. This is very important because we're doing the right side of the car currently. And if you mix them up, you're gonna have vibrations and the car's gonna wobble on the highway and you will freak the hell out. You're like, what is going on? So make sure that it's very important. Make sure you check that out. Okay, once the caliper goes on, just make sure use a wire brush and you clean off the bolts a little bit. You don't need to, but it is best if you do. It'll help you in the future if you're doing another brake job. So the caliper can freely hang in there. It's snug enough and you won't have to worry about, you know, it doing any damage because there's no brake line connected. Okay, so you're just gonna wanna unscrew the new banjo bolt, and as you can see here, there's two copper fittings on them, and these copper fittings go in between the actual brake line, which you'll see in a second. This is extremely important because these are what usually causes the caliper to leak. This is the most important part. If you see older calipers, you'll see there's barely any copper bolts left, or sorry, the copper is almost gone, and that's what causes it to leak. And this is where all your problems usually are coming from. So now we're going to take off the old banjo bolt. It's going to leak a little bit and there's going to be brake fluid everywhere. Do not worry about it. The old one is going to be discarded entirely. Once you get the old banjo bolt out, you can take the new banjo bolt from the new caliper and take the new copper fittings and you can put them in between like so. Make sure they're on opposite ends, one on the threaded end and one on the bolt end. This is to ensure there's no leaks, and this is going to be the highest point in where all the pressure goes, and pressure is going to want to come out of here. So you have to be very careful and make sure you not screw this up, because if you screw this up, you will get brake fluid everywhere and you will lose your brakes. So copper fittings on each side. Now once the banjo bolt is on, you're going to want to torque it to 18 to 20 Newton meters. Okay, now you're going to want to put on the brackets that hold the brake pads. I usually put a little bit of the grease under them, which just a little bit easier for next time to take off. You don't need to do that, but you do need to put the actual lubricant on the brackets themselves right there. Make sure you do not touch the rotor, but you need to make sure that the pads can move freely when you're braking, and they can go in and out and when you're braking. So that is one of the most crucial steps when you're putting on the brake pads. Both on sides, the inside and outside, need to have their special lubricant grease that usually comes with the brakes, or you can buy them separately. So the flat side will face, the back of it will face the caliper itself or the piston, but the back side with the two bumps will face you. You do not want to mix these up because you might get vibrations while you're on the highway. So the flat one will go back where the caliper is, or the piston. And then just like here, the one with the two bumps will go in facing towards you. If you have bracket springs, make sure you put them on. If your brake pads will come with them, that's okay. But this ensures that the brake pads are tracked when you don't brake. Okay, after you put your brackets, your spring brackets in, you can now close up your caliper housing, and you can see that the springs are working just fine. That's great. You want that to happen. Then you take your bolt, screw her in, and then after that you tighten it down. You can torque it to around 26 Newton meters, which is around, I believe, 32 pounds square feet with your torque wrench. Every manufacturer is different. Kia does it around 26. And after that, you're basically finished, but you should always do, obviously, brake flush. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take your 10 millimeter, and you're going to want to open your master cylinder for your brake fluid, and you're going to want to leave that open and let the gravity and air come from the top. And you're going to want to open this so gravity flows, and you're going to want to keep it open until you start seeing brake fluid, because you want the gravity to go down and slowly start flowing. And after it starts flowing, you can close it, hook up your pump or whatever, or your bleeder, and then you're going to want to hook up your bleeder in, open the valve and pump your brakes, and obviously do a fluid flush. And you're going to want to do fluid flush until there's no more bubbles and there's brake fluid flowing and there's no bubbles at all in the line. That means you did a perfect job. And then close it up and you are finished.